Nice. Okay, over here. Go live on Facebook apparently. Can you hear me okay? Nobody, nobody's gonna be on. Oh, live starting. Nice. Hi, welcome everyone. We are opening up our study group for A Course in Miracles. This is the complete and annotated edition. If you'd like to, you can follow along or simply listen. This is an open forum, so if you have any questions or would like to discuss anything that comes up, please comment. Thanks. Shall we begin? Shall we begin with the prayer? Okay. Please allow whatever you would like us to learn and whatever we ought to hear to come through clearly, easefully, and concisely, if you so wish. We are here to extend love. We are perfect sons of God, holy, innocent, whole. We are defenseless against the truth. We come with open hearts and open arms to our brothers who we share this with. Thank you for this teaching and for today. The purpose of today is for miracles. Let's get into it. This is so interesting. They start at the very beginning. Sure. What is A Course in Miracles? A Course in Miracles is a path of spiritual development that takes the form of an educational course consisting of a text, a workbook for students, and a manual for teachers. Its aim is to re-educate our basic perception of reality and teach us to extend this new perception to others so that we can give both happiness and find happiness. I think that's great. Let's continue. The course has no human author in the conventional sense, but was authored through a process of inner dictation. Helen Schuckman and William Thetford were respected psychologists at the top of their field working at Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York City. In the summer of 1965, after years of conflict with each other and within their department, Bill made an impassioned speech to Helen in which he said, "There must be another way." A way in which people could cooperate rather than compete. Helen surprised him by saying she would join him in this new approach. It was a rare moment of joining for them, which they knew was significant at the time, but which had repercussions far beyond what they could have imagined. Helen, a self-professed militant atheist, soon began. Oh, this is great. Ta-da! Self-professed militant atheists soon began having a series of inner visions, heightened dreams, and psychic experiences. This culminated in the fall of 1965 when she heard an inner voice to her say, "This is a course in miracles. Please take notes." The same voice told her that she had agreed to take down A Course in Miracles as her contribution to a larger plan to restore humanity's forward spiritual progress. Thus began 7 years of scribing A Course in Miracles. Helen would write down the words of the inner voice in shorthand notebooks and would later dictate what she had written to Bill, who would type it up. She sometimes resisted taking dictation and often argued with the course's teachings, yet she did her utmost to faithfully record what she was hearing. Despite her skepticism, the course clearly commanded great respect from her. In her autobiography, she wrote of, quote, "the particular combination of certainty, wisdom, gentleness, clarity, and patience that characterized the voice. End quote. She and Bill considered the course a sacred trust that they had been charged with, and Helen ultimately came to refer to it as her life's work. Once A Course in Miracles was published in 1976, it had a similar effect on readers. They, like Helen, often argued with it, yet at the same time granted it tremendous authority, and many devoted their lives to it. In the time since it was published, the course has sold nearly 3 million copies. It has become a modern spiritual classic, acquiring a scriptural status in the eyes of readers around the world. A course. First and foremost, A Course in Miracles is a course, an educational program. It is designed to take its students through a process of internalizing its thought system. In this process, we learn to accept into our minds and extend to others what the Course calls miracles, which heal the perception of the one receiving them. Each of the Course's 3 volumes signifies a different phase in this overall process. The volumes need not be done in order, but they are arranged in a logical sequence that reflects the overall progression the course seems to expect students to pass through. The text is first, longest, and most important volume. It provides the theoretical foundation of the course. The text is a masterpiece of spiritual thought. As it guides us through hundreds of topics, the meanings we have assigned the world begin to fall away, revealing a new meaning in everything. This happens even on the level of language. The course uses familiar terms, but fills them with new meaning, making each term a microcosm of its thought system. As a result, the text is not an easy read. To reap its rewards, we have to truly engage with it. The Course asks us to read its words slowly and carefully, thinking about what they mean. It asks us to take them personally and treat them as practical, as more than an intellectual game. If we will do this with the text, we will experience our old worldview being slowly dismantled and a new worldview arising in its place. Study of the text is the first phase of the course's program. It is here that the course's thought system initially enters our minds. This is only the beginning of the process, yet it is the foundation for all that follows. The second volume, the workbook, contains 365 lessons, one for each day of the year. In each lesson, with the exception of review lessons, we take a single course idea and practice it in specified ways throughout the day. As we apply it to ourselves, to others, and to our daily situations and events, our perception shifts and we see with new eyes. We feel peace where before we felt anxiety and agitation. We ultimately learn to unfold each day in peace so that we begin the day in a state of peace, renew that peace throughout the day, recover it when it is shaken, and end the day resting in that same peace. In service of this goal, the workbook teaches us a variety of different practices, including its own methods of meditation and prayer. The workbook then is really a training program in the course's system of spiritual practice. Even though it is designed as a 1-year program, it is meant to ground us in a lifelong habit of spiritual practice to usher us into a new internal way of life. Practice of the workbook is the second phase in the course's curriculum. Through practice, the same ideas that we learned in the text become more deeply internalized. They increasingly become the lens through which we see and the source of what we feel. The manual for teachers, while it can be read by any student, is written to those who have completed the text and the workbook and will now extend the course's thought system to others. The manual focuses on 2 forms of this extension. The first form is that of the teacher of pupils, in which a more experienced student of the course plays the role of mentor, skillfully guiding a pupil along the path of the course. This is apparently the course's preferred method for teaching and learning its curriculum. The other form is that of a healer, who goes to those with health issues and shines the healing power of forgiveness into their minds. Extending to others can take many forms in addition to these, but its essence is simply the giving of love, usually in very ordinary ways. Extension is the third and final phase in the course's program. Here, we take the same thought system we studied in the text and practiced in the workbook and extend it to others in the form of expressions of love. This benefits us as well as them, for when we give away an idea, like love, we strengthen its presence in our minds. As the Course says, quote, everything you teach, you are learning. Teach only love, and learn that love is yours, and you are love. End quote. Through our extension, the Course's thought system receives its final reinforcement in us, so that at last commands our total belief. The new world of meaning that we first encountered in the text has now become the only meaning that we see in ourselves and in all things. A teaching. A Course in Miracles offers a unique perspective on reality, the human condition, and the path to happiness. What follows is an attempt to condense its grand symphony of ideas into a brief summary. The foundation for everything in the Course is its concept of an unconditionally loving God. Though God is genderless, the Course describes God as being like the perfect Father, purely loving, without the slightest trace of anger, only expanded to infinity. Before time began, this loving Father created us as his beloved sons. He poured all of his attributes, all of his being into us so that we were exactly like him. Egoless, limitless, and filled with an impartial, all-encompassing love. He created us without bodies, without any boundaries to wall us off from him. We thus existed in boundless oneness with God and with each other, basking in a love from him that exceeds our current comprehension. As the Course says about love, about this love, quote, there is nothing on earth with which it can be compared, and nothing that you have felt apart from him that resembles it ever so faintly. We lived in a timeless heaven in a state of happiness so expansive that taking our greatest moment of earthly happiness and multiplying it 10,000 times only begins to hint at it. Such a heaven may sound alien to us now, yet this, says the Course, is our natural environment. This is home. What then happened? Quote, into eternity, where all is one, there crept a tiny, mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. Also, forgot to laugh. Into eternity, where all is one, there crept a tiny, mad idea at which the Son of God forgot to laugh. We had a thought that we could go our own way, that we could be above the other sons and even above God. This was impossible, for all of reality is changelessly held within the power of God's authorship. And so we withdrew into a dream of separation. We collectively dreamt an entire universe in which everyone was separate, selfishly contending with each other, and locked inside vulnerable bodies that aged and died. The Course teaches that the world of time and space was not created by God. Quote, he is not mad, yet only madness makes a world like this. It also teaches that, however solid this world may seem to be, it is not truly real. This might initially sound disheartening, yet it is actually wonderful news, for it means that heaven remains the only reality and that this world of pain never really happened. From an ultimate standpoint, it is laughable to think that we could truly leave God and make a world apart from Him. We therefore have a rational bias for feeling free from all that we have done and all that has been done to us, for we are free from it. We, however, believe this world is real, and so all of our efforts go towards rearranging its circumstances. We chase after possessions and money and power. We search for that special person who will make us happy. We lavish attention on our body, its appearance, its pleasure, its comfort, and its safety. Yet none of it really works. It all just perpetuates the real problem which remains unaddressed. The real problem is not in the world, it is in our mind. The problem is what the Course calls the ego. The ego is nothing more than a false belief about our identity. It is the belief that we are separate, alone, and on our own. The ego is egocentric. Its basic mode is attack, both in the form of attack thoughts, for example, judgment or condemnation, and attacking behavior. We try to cover up our attack with smiles, but their basic intent is still to take from others their self-respect, their possessions, their status, their innocence, for the sake of our own gain. All we really receive, however, is a crushing burden of guilt. Over time, our sins, quote unquote sins, accumulate so that we end up dragging our past misdeeds behind us like heavy chains. Deep in our unconscious, we believe that we have hopelessly defiled our original innocence, that we have, quote, made a devil of God's son, end quote. This belief is the hidden cause of all of our suffering, for it is a constant affirmation that we deserve to suffer as punishment for what we've done. The Course puts it bluntly, quote, guilt is the sole cause of pain in any form, end quote. In a desperate attempt to get rid of this guilt, we project it outward. Now the guilt that we see inside appears to be outside of us, lurking in everyone we meet. And now the pain that is actually caused from within by guilt seems to come at us from without, from a series of callous people and calamitous events. Through projection, we see ourselves as a good person surrounded by a cruel world, a world bristling with potential threats. We therefore live in a state of fear, wondering where the next attack will come from. What we don't realize is that the real source of fear is our own guilt. We are afraid that our sins will eventually catch up with us. As hopeless as this scenario sounds, the Course teaches that there is a way out of the ego and all of the suffering it brings. This way involves a transformation of our thinking, a transformation that mainly takes the form of a sea change in our perception of others. We begin by realizing that our current view of others, far from being objective truth, is the product of hidden dynamics in our own minds. Other people are radically different from the beings we perceive them to be. We see them as sinners who have stolen our happiness, but that is only because we have projected onto them the sense of sinfulness within us that has really robbed us of our happiness. We see them as tiny bodies containing petty personalities, but in truth, they are something infinitely greater. They are the limitless sons of God who are still as pure and holy as they were in the instant God created them. If we can just withdraw our projections and see past outer experiences, outer appearances, we will see in others, as the Course puts it, a beauty that will enchant you and will never cease to cause you wonderment at its perfection. Oh. And the beauty we see in them, we will then recognize in ourselves. This shift in perception is called forgiveness, but it's a very different kind of forgiveness than what we are used to. In the Course, we do not first assume that another person really deserves our anger, but then go ahead and forgive her anyway. Rather, we realize that our anger is based on a mistaken perception of her, and so then we let that perception go. We forgive, in other words, by realizing that there is nothing to forgive. This kind of forgiveness is so egoless that in our ego-bound state, we need the help of the Holy Spirit or God's voice in the dream to complete it. It is He who, in the holy instant, accomplishes the miracle of forgiveness within us. Yet, because this forgiveness is egoless, choosing it teaches us that we are egoless. If to err is human and to forgive divine, then our forgiveness shows us that we are divine. Through forgiveness, we begin to relate to others in a new way. Rather than taking from them to meet our needs, we extend help and healing to them for the sake of their needs. We take the love that arises in us through forgiveness, or seeing clearly that there is nothing to forgive, and express it in a helpful way. This, in fact, is the main meaning of the word miracle in the Course, an expression of love that heals the perception of another, which is what love always does. As our love deepens, giving miracles becomes our whole function, our life purpose. Quote, I am the light of the world, end quote, the workbook has us say. Quote, that is my only function. That is why I am here. End quote. In this function, we rely on the guidance of the Holy Spirit, trusting Him to tell us who needs our help and how they can best receive it. Rather than this being a noble sacrifice, it fills us with joy. For the more we give, the more we ourselves receive. As the Course assures us many times, giving and receiving are the same. Our practice of forgiveness and our extension to others eventually allow the eyes of Christ to open within us. These are spiritual eyes in us that see with true vision. Seeing past bodies, they look upon the holiness in others just as plainly as our body's eyes look on physical forms. Through the eyes of Christ, we will at last see the real world, a world of light, composed of the radiant holiness in everyone and everything. The body of another will now seem increasingly irrelevant and, quote, will at length be seen as little more than just a shadow circling round the good, end quote. No longer will we see a world of enemies poised to attack, although the forms of the world will still behave much as they did before. We will see beneath the surface to a world that could not be more opposite. Everyone and everything I see will lean toward me to bless me. I will recognize in everyone my dearest friend. From the workbook. And we, in turn, will love everyone with a divine love that completely ignores all differences between people, including differences in how they treat us. The real world is ultimately an illusion, yet it is a pristine reflection of reality. And so when we have fully entered the real world, we are just a step away from heaven. Our love and forgiveness have taught us that we are not the guilty ego we had believed ourselves to be. Did we really think we had the power to change the purity God gave us? Quote, we lay aside the arrogance which says that we are sinners, guilty and afraid, ashamed of what we are, and lift our hearts in true humility instead to Him who has created us immaculate, like to Himself in power and in love. End quote. Our own efforts are now done. All barriers to the awareness of our true identity are past. We are finally ready to be in our Father's love again. Now, God Himself leans down to us, quote, and takes us in His arms and sweeps away the cobwebs of our sleep. End quote. Now he lifts us back into our waking state of oneness with him. Now at last we can say to him, in the words of the closing line of the text, quote, and we are home where you would have us be. End quote. Oh, that's great. So we just read the introduction for A Course in Miracles, which breaks down a lot of information about what A Course in Miracles is, why we're studying it, right? We're studying it because we want to see the world clearly, right? Just like what Helen and Bill said, what Bill said to Helen, right? What did he say? He said, there must be another way. There must be another way. And this is what we're seeing all over the world constantly. We have been trying over and over, again and again, to do the same thing and expect different results.
This is true. Mm.
There must be another way of doing things. There must be another way. And this is true. And we see this happening all the time, right? There seems to be a massive upheaval towards, we'll say, spirituality or spiritual awakening around the world, globally, right? There seems to be a shift towards spiritual interest, we'll say, right? And I think most of this comes from this sense of there must be another way. The way I've been doing things is not working. I've been doing things is not working. So this course is literally a class in seeing things differently, a class in doing things a different way. Nice. I love that.
That's very good.
Very concise compared to if you guys haven't seen the Course in Miracles, it's pretty thick. So to have a, 2 or 3 pages that really distill down what A Course in Miracles is about and what it's for is really helpful. Okay, let's continue. The issue of authorship. When encountering A Course in Miracles, it is impossible to avoid the question of authorship. No author is listed on the cover because the book was not authored in the conventional manner. Helen Schuckman thought of herself not as the author, but as the scribe. According to her, she was merely writing down the words spoken to her by a voice in her mind. The claimed identity of this voice is not hard to discern. The author refers to his birth as the event that we celebrate at Christmas, his teachings and miracles as recorded in the New Testament, his disciples, including Judas and Peter, the biblical titles given to him, like the Lamb of God and Prince of Peace, his crucifixion, his resurrection, his post-resurrection appearances, his ascension, his sending of the Holy Spirit, and his current day followers. The author clearly talks about himself as Jesus. People have been uncomfortable with this claim from the beginning. Helen would write about the author euphemistically as the voice, and in public gatherings would have someone else respond to the inevitable question as to the identity of the voice. Helen's co-scribe, Bill Thetford, also shied away from identifying the source of the material as Jesus, seeming to point instead to a spiritual influence beyond conceptualization. Even today, while course students seem to generally accept Jesus as the author, this Jesus seems largely disconnected from the man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago. Sorry, not disconnected. This Jesus seems largely dissociated from the man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago. What do we do about a modern day book that claims to be authored by the most revered religious figure in human history? How do we evaluate a claim like that? One place to begin is by acknowledging that, as outlandish as the claim may initially seem, for perhaps most of us, such a thing is at least theoretically possible. For Christians, Jesus is still present and able to communicate with us, and for those who do, and for those who believe in life after death, a majority of people worldwide, according to polls, that's so funny. Jesus, like everyone else, would have survived his death and therefore could, in theory, make contact with us. Obviously, however, it's not enough for it to be theoretically possible that Jesus authored A Course in Miracles. We need specific reasons for believing that he did. And here we run against what looks like an insurmountable barrier. The Jesus of A Course in Miracles is a very different figure than the Jesus of traditional Christianity. He does not see himself, for instance, as the only begotten Son of God. Likewise, he does not see salvation as hinging on faith in him. And he emphatically rejects the idea that he died for our sins. Woohoo! This would seem to put the rest of the course's authorship claim, except for one thing. 2 centuries of historical scholarship have established that the real Jesus of Nazareth also did not fit the image of the traditional Jesus. Indeed, there are tantalizing parallels between the historical Jesus as revealed by scholarship and the author of A Course in Miracles. These parallels become especially interesting when we look at a body of sayings found in both Matthew and Luke that most scholars believe came from an earlier sayings gospel. This gospel is called Q by scholars and is widely regarded as our earliest and best source for the original teachings of Jesus. To see these parallels, we must first try to flesh out the historical Jesus by learning on the work of modern scholarship, by leaning on the work of modern scholarship, and by examining the most well-attested sayings in the Gospels, with special weight given to material regarded as coming from the sayings gospel Q. We can construct the following portrait of Jesus of Nazareth and his teachings. A portrait of the historical Jesus and his teachings. Jesus primarily presented himself not as a dying and rising Savior, but as a teacher. Further, his teaching was not mainly about himself. Instead, he was a teacher of wisdom, which means his teaching was about how to live in this world, not how to attain a blessed state in the next. The wisdom he taught was not a conventional wisdom that set forth bland moral precepts. Rather, it was a subversive wisdom that overturned his audience's most basic assumptions about life and beckoned them to enter into a radically new perception of reality. Renowned Jesus scholar Marcus Borg offered this summary of the consensus of the field. Rather strikingly, the most certain thing we know about Jesus, according to the current scholarly consensus, is that he was a teller of stories and a speaker of great one-liners, whose purpose was the transformation of perception. At the center of his message was an invitation to see differently. Like many other sages, Jesus lays before his audience 2 pathways. The first is the way of the world. One might assume that being a religious teacher, he would see the way to be avoided as consisting of sinful disobedience to God's laws. However, for him, the problem lies in conventional life itself, the life that we are all leading, which he portrays in surprisingly realistic terms. The characters in his sayings are trying to make their way in a harsh world. Guided by the usual self-interest and egotism, they are filled with anxiety and self-concern as they contemplate what they are up against. They are anxious about money, about food, and clothing. They are beset by enemies, poverty, disease, and death. They are trying to climb the social ladder or are being stepped on at the bottom of it. They are desperately trying to win at a game in which, strangely, even the winners end up losing. In short, they are a lot like us. In the midst of our losing battle, Jesus offers us a way out. Rather than being at the mercy of a hostile world, we can place ourselves in the care of a loving Father. Jesus' view of God is a bold departure from tradition. We are accustomed to thinking of God as the righteous judge who sorts people into their appropriate categories, punishing the wicked and rewarding the good. Jesus says, quote, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Oh, whoops. Okay. iPhone. Oh, okay. But in saying after saying, Jesus reveals a God of indiscriminate generosity, as one scholar puts it, a God who lavishes his care equally on sinner and saint. He makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, Jesus says, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Jesus then calls us to imitate God's unconditional love in our own relationships. Just as God does not sort people into those he draws near and those he casts out, so Jesus calls us to follow suit, to stop restricting our love to our inner circle. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? He calls us to love the destitute, the hated foreigner, our oppressor, and even our enemy with the same wholehearted love we currently reserve for our closest companions. This involves rising above our stingy habit of reciprocity, of treating others as they treat us. Thus, if someone wrongs us 500 times, we still continue to forgive. If we know that a borrower won't be able to pay us back, we lend to him anyway. If someone assaults us and tries to forcibly take something from us, we turn it into an opportunity to give, and then generously give him twice of what he's trying to take. Jesus' aim is to persuade us to make the leap from the world's way into his way. He is trying to talk us into a seismic inner shift in our values, our sense of identity, and our perception of the world. It may seem impossible for such a profound change to be induced simply through talk, yet Jesus is a master of words. Perhaps we picture him using words to simply proclaim the truth based on scriptural authority or his own personal authority, but instead he reasons with us. He appeals to our own ability to see. He begins with a realistic story, an observation of nature, or a common sense principle, and from that familiar starting point, he leads us to a different world. He uses ordinary persuasion to bring us to an extraordinary conclusion. This conclusion is that the only logical choice is to embrace his way and enter what he calls the kingdom of heaven, which scholars agree was his central theme. We tend to think of the kingdom as being synonymous with heaven, or as being a new world that descends to earth in fire and judgment. But many of Jesus' sayings depict the kingdom as something that individuals can enter now, something that, quote, is spread out upon the earth and men do not see it, end quote. In this view, to enter the kingdom is to perceive reality so differently that we, in effect, live in a different world. In this world, the unconditional care of God becomes our experiential reality, and the worldly threats and assaults that once terrified us fade into insignificance. We are released from the crippling self-concern that plagued us before. Anxiety has been replaced by celebration. Now we are carefree, knowing that we are cared for. And once we enter the kingdom, we have the power to bring it to others. Our forgiveness can liberate them from disease. Our prayers can cleanse them of inner demons. Our kindness can lift them out of their own self-concern. We can perform miracles, and each one of them is a little advent of the kingdom and cure the sick there, quote, and cure the sick there, and say to them, the kingdom of God has reached unto you, end quote. This is how the kingdom comes, in the loosing of chains that seem unbreakable. And as the kingdom comes to more and more people, they too can become its messengers, so that God's kingdom continues to spread out until one day it will come to the earth as a whole, until, in the words of Isaiah, the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as waters cover the sea. Huh. Implications for A Course in Miracles. To the extent that the foregoing portrait is accurate, then Jesus of Nazareth was clearly not the figure that tradition has made him out to be. How many of you could have guessed that. I know I could have guessed that reading the Bible growing up. I know that I totally could have guessed that the teachings and the ways that Jesus was depicted in the Bible were not totally accurate. They may have been shifted, they may have been changed a little bit to suit the times or to suit whoever was teaching them in order to give them more power, right? Let's continue. Okay. Jesus of Nazareth was clearly not the figure that tradition has made him out to be. Instead, he turns out to be a figure that is strikingly parallel to the author of A Course in Miracles. For a student of the Course, these parallels can be astonishing. Jesus was a teacher, quote, whose purpose was the transformation of perception, end quote. How can the conclusions of historians, who typically know little or nothing about A Course in Miracles, sound so much like the descriptions of the Course? Almost everything in the above picture of the historical Jesus echoes central elements in the Course. Jesus as a teacher of wisdom, his aim of a transformation of perception, his radical reversal of conventional assumptions, the contrasting between two opposing ways, the problem as conventional life, the emphasis on an attacking world, the vision of God as unconditionally loving, the call to unconditionally love and forgive others, the attempt to reason us into a profound change of mind, the goal of a liberated state of mind, and the imperative to extend this state to others in the form of miracles, all of these are key aspects of A Course in Miracles. Even Jesus' concept of entering the quote, kingdom of heaven is paralleled by the Course's concept of reaching the quote, real world, end quote. These parallels are not so general as to be vacuous. The vision of Jesus as outlined above is highly distinctive. There is nothing quite like it in the history of religion, yet much of its distinctive essence is shared by the Course. All in all, it is very surprisingly easy to see A Course in Miracles as a 20th century version of the first century message of Jesus. And yet, such comparisons, as suggestive as they are not enough. It obviously takes more than intellectual considerations like these to really arrive at the conviction that the author of the Course is Jesus. It takes the development of an implicit trust in him. It takes a sense it takes a sense that the stature of the Course's author really justifies our identifying him with the most towering figure in history. It takes an indefinable recognition, one that is impossible to quantify and that develops in its own time, often through personal experiences of his presence. What these parallels can do is make the notion of Jesus being the author of the Course a reasonable option. They mean that one can believe in his authorship not out of foolish gullibility or a desperate need to believe, but as a result of sober reflection on the evidence. They mean that it is premature to reject the idea out of hand that, at the very least, we ought to open our minds to the possibility. And just think for a moment about that possibility. Did someone knock at the door? You don't think
I
so?
think they entered. No, sure.
Oh, okay. Thanks for checking.
Yeah.
Need to get a new open sign, apparently. They mean that it is premature to reject the idea out of hand, and at the very least, we ought to open our minds to the possibility. And just think for a moment about that possibility. The appearance of Jesus 2,000 years ago changed the world forever. He was a little known teacher who briefly walked the countryside preaching to rural villagers before being executed as a criminal, yet he possessed a singular quality that made his influence unstoppable. From the humblest of beginnings, his impact fanned out irresistibly to the point where it shaped our subsequent civilization. Today, his followers constitute almost a third of the world's population, though we only have fragments of his teachings. Those fragments have echoed down the centuries and become woven into the fabric of our culture. Turn the other cheek, go the extra mile, do unto others. What if this same person has now authored a book for our modern age? And in this book, he lays out with equal eloquence the same vision as before, only now he presents it in far greater depth and detail and with extensive practical instruction. What if that lovely figure that humanity has been waiting for centuries to see again has, in some sense, already returned? What would that mean for our world and for ourselves? To be a student of A Course in Miracles, you do not have to believe it was written by Jesus. You simply have to seek to understand and practice the teachings. Yet, accepting that these teachings come from Jesus can be a tremendous aid in that process because of the authority it grants them, and because you will then be likely to call on Jesus' help in walking this path, help that the Course repeatedly promises is available. Although the identity of the voice that authored the Course cannot be proven, we do have to call him or it something. Throughout the complete and annotated edition, we will call him by the name Jesus, not as a statement of established fact, but not as something you are required to believe, but merely because this is the name the author gives himself and because we ourselves accept that claim. Fun. Yay. Thanks, Jesus. Oh, now we're actually in the introduction. This is so fun. This is so fun. Do you think it's Jesus?
Oh, yes.
You think Jesus wrote The Course in Miracles?
He inspired somebody to write it, like as a translation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Spoke like channeled through someone,
Yeah.
spoke through someone to write it.
Yeah. I've asked, I prayed, and yes, because like my background, just really briefly, I come from a religious background, and I always felt in my later years that there were some contradictions in the teachings, especially from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And I've always searched for the truth. And so here I am now. I've been shown this book, and some of these principles and these teachings really spoke deep down to my heart, and I
Yeah,
can feel that it's coming from there.
nice.
Yeah.
Cool. I think it's fun.
Yes.
I like to call Jesus JC. Put a more modern spin on it. Like, oh yeah, my buddy JC, you know? That's my way. That's my way. That's the fun way. You can do it my way. Then nobody gets upset. People are like, oh, you're talking about Jesus in public. It's like, no, not the Jesus you think I'm talking about. A little bit different. A little bit different. The OG, talk about OG JC. Okay. I'll be serious. Introduction to the complete and annotated edition. A Course in Miracles has become a contemporary spiritual classic. It stands by itself, not part of any larger, excuse me, not part of any larger tradition, and with no centralized movement behind it. The strength of its popularity can, in large part, be attributed to one reason: the power, beauty, and wisdom of its words. Since it was originally published in 1976, originally published in 76, you guys, readers have recognized in those words truths that they had never heard before, yet somewhere inside seemed to have always known. How often is this? I think this is a shared experience with spiritual wisdom and spiritual truth, kind of across the board, is that it feels more like a remembering than like you're actually learning new information.
Yes.
I hear this from everyone all the time and experience it myself. Readers have recognized in those words truths that they had never heard before, yet somewhere inside seemed to have always known. So yummy. As a result, those words have inspired profound and lifelong devotion in thousands of students around the world. At the heart of that devotion is the belief that those words came from beyond the human level, that rather than being conceived by Helen Schuckman, they were received by her, perhaps from the very place they claim to have come, from the mind of Jesus. What students did not know for many years, however, is how much human input went into the published work. The original dictation that Helen took down was run through a lengthy editing process that produced a new version with each editing pass. And during each new editing pass, the editors apparently consulted only the most recent version rather than going back to the original. Oh, will you do me a favor? Will you grab one of those copies over there? Awesome, thanks. So again, so each time it was edited over the years, they just went back to the most recent copy instead of going back to the original copy that Helen um, dictated and wrote down. So rather than going back to the original, by the end of the process, roughly 45,000 words had been edited out, mostly from the first 7 chapters of the text, and the wording of the first 4 chapters had been edited to the point where only about a fifth of their sentences retained their original wording. Some of this editing of the early text chapters was genuinely needed, given that some of the early material was too personal for a published edition. Indeed, Helen Schucman received general guidelines and, in regard to some passages, specific instructions for how the editing was to be done. Yet the editing appears to have gone beyond what was instructed. As a result, the author's attempts to clarify his ideas with illustrations, analogies, real life examples, and comparisons to existing ideas were largely edited out. And so, a vital bridge into his new and unfamiliar world of thought was essentially removed. As the earlier versions of A Course in Miracles came to light in the beginning years of the 21st century, it became clear to us that there was a need for a new edition, an edition that was created by going back to Helen's shorthand notebooks and then editing afresh, retaining the original words to the maximum degree possible. Great. This is a great time to talk about this. This is the complete and annotated edition. It has a purple cover. If you want to follow along, or if you're interested in A Course in Miracles, um, this was revised in 2021, right? So you want the purple cover copy. I also have a copy of the blue cover Course in Miracles, and you can see the difference. So the blue copy is one that, as the course or as this introduction to the course states, has been edited down over and over and over again. Um, and as part of that, a lot of the core teachings and a lot of the wording has been removed. Let's continue. The complete and annotated edition then is based directly on Helen's original handwritten notes. By going back to the words that Helen Schucman heard in her mind and wrote down in her notebooks, it attempts to bring the reader into a more direct encounter with the power of those words. It includes, either in its main body or in its appendices, the approximately 45,000 words that had been removed in the original published edition. 45,000 words. That's a lot of words. Wow. This is like double. This is almost double. Okay. As the basis for this edition, we have carefully transcribed Helen's notes, which were written in a combination of shorthand and handwriting that can be very difficult to read. Our transcription involved producing a key of her shorthand symbols, figuring out unclear words, and reading beneath strike-throughs to detect original wording, which is sometimes preferable. Starting with an accurate transcription of her notes, we then re-edited A Course in Miracles from the beginning. Our focus on inclusion of all material has resulted in a work with a number of key features. The first 4 chapters of the text are roughly twice as long as they are in the familiar Foundations for Inner Peace edition. Material whose meaning has been changed by editing is now presented in its original form. For instance, we have restored the original statement, quote, prepare you not for the undoing of what never was, which has been changed in the FIP edition to prepare you now for the undoing of what never was. Material that has been rearranged and placed in a different order by editing has, in almost all cases, been restored to its original order. Extensive footnotes have been included to clarify difficult passages, identify unclear pronouns, define psychological terms, point out allusions to things in general culture, and list course references and Bible references. 33 cameo essays have been written and are included in Appendix 1. These essays comment on personal guidance given by the source of the material to the scribes. This guidance, while too personal for the course proper, clarifies the application of course principles to the lives of the scribes and by extension to the lives of all students. Material that never made it out of Helen's notebooks is included, such as this passage, quote, "Love him steadily, whatever he does, whatever he says, and he will see the miracle of God, and you will learn of salvation. If this seems hard to do, remember it is what you want of me." End quote. Dictation that is too personal for the course proper but is too short to be the subject of a cameo essay is commented on in the editing notes. These can be found online. All original emphasis of words is retained, either as italics or as gray underlines, as this helps illuminate the meaning. Most of the text section titles and many of the text section divisions are new. Documentation and often explanation of editing changes is included online. The teaching of this edition does not contradict the teachings found in other editions of A Course in Miracles. However, we believe that this edition, through its inclusion of additional teachings and restoration of original wording and order, will allow the course's true meaning and character to shine through a little more clearly. And we hope that this will enable students to better see the course for what it is, relate to it as it is, and apply its profound truths to their lives. Oh, yay! The next section, if you have a copy of A Course in Miracles, you will be able to see, is showing us how the references work, how it is going to call on specific references. For example, IN refers to the introduction, etc., etc. A Course in Miracles. Introduction. This is A Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. And then we're here at footnote 1. The manual for teachers later clarifies these opening sentences, saying, quote, "As the course emphasizes, you are not free to choose the curriculum or even the form in which you will learn it. You are free, however, to decide when you want to learn it." End quote. The curriculum in this line refers to the universal curriculum, which has many thousands of forms. A Course in Miracles simply being one of them. The point being made, it seems, is that what is required is the universal course, and that any particular form of it, such as A Course in Miracles, is required only for those to whom that form is assigned. Nice. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. Footnote 2. In the course's teaching, we cannot be taught the meaning of love because as long as we are learning, we are in the state of perception. And in this state, we cannot know what love really means, what love really is. We view it as something selective, partial, and changing, which it is not. However, once we remove our blocks to love, for clarity, remove our blocks to the awareness of love. Love can never actually be blocked. Once we remove our blocks to our awareness of love, we pass beyond perception to what the Course calls knowledge, where we are one with the mind of God. The Course says, quote, "And it is only there that love has meaning, and only there can it be understood." End quote. Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. And we will find as we continue in this course that fear does not really exist. We made it up. There is no justification for fear. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. This is a great test you can apply at any time too, right? If you're looking at something and you're noticing an uncomfortable emotion or an uncomfortable feeling, right? Or something like fear come up. Ask yourself what is the subject you're worried about? What are you worried about? Right? And apply this exact very simple thing. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists, right? So if you're saying, "Oh, I'm worried about my body," right? Can your body be threatened? Oh, sure it can. Great. Cool. Doesn't exist,
Yeah.
right? And you are free from the worry, right? If you are worried about something somehow affecting your soul or making you guilty, right? If you are worried that you are guilty, right? You can ask yourself, "Oh, can my spirit be threatened? Can I really, who I really am, be threatened?" No. Oh, okay. Now the fear can dissolve in that way, right? So it becomes um, the true kind of sword of clarity in determining what's real and what's not real. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Can it be threatened? It's not real, right? Volume 1 of the text. Chapter 1, Principles of Miracles. You will see miracles through your hands, through me. And we are going to footnote 1, and it says, see cameo 1. This is not a selfish gift. So we are going towards the back of the book to cameo 1 on page 1683. I always forget that this first day is a lot of reading.
It's good though.
Yeah,
Important.
it's
Yeah.
very helpful. It's just very different than, once we were getting into the principles. It was like read a little, we were going through so slowly
Yeah.
because there's so much teaching coming through, but it's perfect.
Yeah.
Cameo 1. This is not a selfish gift. In June of 1965, after years of conflict in their professional lives, Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford joined in the goal of demonstrating, quote, another way, which they hoped would transform their working relationships. This triggered in Helen that summer a series of startling inner visions and paranormal experiences. Then, apparently, toward the end of that summer, she made what turned out to be a precinct announcement. She writes, one day during that same summer, I told Bill I was about to do something very unexpected. I had no idea what it was, but I knew it was going to happen soon. At Bill's urging, I had begun keeping a sort of diary since our visit to Virginia Beach. Now, Bill suggested that if I wrote down whatever occurred to me in connection with that unexpected something, I might find out what it was. Therefore, sometime around October 18th or 19th, Helen began writing down something or anything that seemed relevant. She said in her autobiography, quote, nothing much came of my attempts at first, and I was on the point of giving them up, end quote. But actually, these early writings clearly reveal a spiritual impulse that was trying to emerge into consciousness, just like a new shoot starting to push through the soil. She records spiritual reflections that do not at all sound like the musings of a self-professed militant atheist. I always think that's such a funny detail. When people find that out, once we get into the Course in Miracles, when you're reading it, it absolutely sounds nothing like someone who is a militant atheist, right? Which to me further proves that it's coming through her, right? She's writing essentially from the voice in her head,
Yeah.
right? From JC. Um, yeah, but it's really interesting. Okay. I think under the projection and all that stuff is a, oh, this is, Helen is writing this now. I think under the projection and all that stuff is a hidden nostalgia for the soul. We want it back so we can identify with it because that is what we are really, and somewhere we know it. Ooh, ooh, goosebumps. She writes, This AM, it occurred to me that I had no right to waste anything, money, clothes, or my own life, because everything has to be used right. It all has a place in the plan, and we must not throw gifts away. The course writes, It seems clear that these thoughts are coming from somewhere beyond Helen's conscious mind. Indeed, an insight she writes down regarding her tendency to forget names, parentheses, it may be more a fear of involvement or interaction, end, is later identified by the course's author as coming from him. Quote, I emphasize again that your tendency to forget names is not hostility, but a fear of involvement or recognition. End quote. She records dreams with obvious spiritual content. In one account, she says, the crucifixion was a total rejection of the body by others, projection, and its destruction, which was really a purification. As a result, the soul could enter entirely into the temple, heal it, and use it only constructively. That's cool. She also records prayers, including a long impassioned prayer for Dave Diamond, a friend who is dying from brain cancer. This prayer is infused with ideas that will later appear in the course, as we can see in these excerpts. She writes, Dave, don't give in. You have a real mission. Don't lose your chance. Miracles are the natural law. Miracles are the natural law. Then I asked Christ to help Dave know he was there and to see him and know the truth so he could be free. Your spirit and mine can unite, and then two of us have come together in Christ's name. Jesus promised to be there, Dave. Your brain does not matter if you will understand life as Jesus did. Ooh.
Mm.
Finally, sprinkled throughout these writings, she records statements from a voice that speaks as if it is Jesus that Helen calls Christ. She writes, I was really quite depressed this AM, which is now very unusual. I used to be depressed all the time, but he says, quote, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world, end quote. This is a direct line from the Bible that Helen is quoting unknowingly. I have overcome the world. Then on October 20th, everything changed. The voice, which we will call by the name that it later gave itself, Jesus, went from showing up in occasional brief statements to delivering a more extended discourse. And this discourse, which was specifically about Bill receiving guidance and Helen asking on his behalf, became the jumping off point for the dictation of A Course in Miracles. Earlier, Helen had written down the following items. Number one, ask what is interfering with Bill's meditation and how to overcome this. Two, Bill's list. Now, on the day before the course would begin coming through, Helen returns to these two items, the first of which is specifically about Bill's ability to hear guidance in meditation. He has apparently been wondering how he can access a gift like the one that Helen has stumbled upon. Here is the question that she asks of her guidance. She writes, I said he promised to come when he was called on, and Bill asks for guidance and does not receive, and has really tried to knock, and it has not been opened to him. I think the door is ajar a bit, but I really wouldn't call it very open. Is it all right if I ask you for him since he wants me to? Before recording this question, Helen had actually already started to write down Jesus' answer. She wrote, 1. If you do not get an answer, it is always because you ask amiss. But then cross this out. Now she writes his answer down in full. His answer, I can't answer when he asks amiss. When he asks right, I have answered. He has a tendency to get part of an answer and decide himself when to disconnect. He should ask if that's all. Since I don't know when he's going to ring off, I have to be very short and even cryptic. It chops up messages too much. The main problem then is that Bill is too quick to hang up the phone, so to speak. Now Jesus elaborates on further areas of interference. There is also interference from three major areas, the first three items on the numbered list that follows. Number one, excuse me. Number one, he doesn't have much real confidence that I will get through. He never just claims his rights. He should begin with much more confidence. I'll keep my promises. The writing now apparently switches to Helen speaking to Bill, but you do not act as if you really expect him to. Interesting. This attitude of asking with confidence, as if claiming a birthright, is the same attitude encouraged in the workbook's instructions for listening for guidance. For example, quote, there is a message waiting for you. Be confident that you will receive it. Remember, it belongs to you. End quote. There is another, oh, number two, Jesus writes, this is on the list of three major areas of interference that Bill is experiencing. Number two, there is another kind of related error, which is illustrated by his question about, quote, when are you going to call the hospital? End quote. It's not right to interfere just to check. It's selfish. But more than that, it makes things too personal, which always implies doubt. The cameo continues, breaking this down a little bit more. Without knowing what the call to the hospital is about, it's hard to be sure what this means. Jesus mentions this situation later, saying, quote, remember your slip about the effect on Neurological Institute and his, Bill's, asking when you were going to call up, end quote. Whatever the details, Bill is being interfering and even selfish due to his own lack of trust. The implication may be that Bill's asking for inner guidance at times has the same quality. This might be a clarification of the earlier idea that Bill sometimes asks amiss. Number three, Jesus writes, he has to learn better concentration. His mind flits around too much for good communication. Suggest a very short phrase like, quote, here I am, Lord, end quote. And, now addressing Bill directly, don't think of anything else. Just pull in your mind slowly from everywhere else and center on these words. Here, Jesus gives Bill a meditation technique, which involves putting all of his attention on being fully present to God and on nothing else. The idea is that this kind of concentrated focus on God will help Bill hear guidance. This, too, is a foreshadowing of the workbook. It anticipates the workbook's meditation instructions, which sometimes involve making oneself fully present to God. See Lesson 183, for example, and it anticipates the workbook's training in stilling one's mind in order to hear guidance. Quote, his voice awaits your silence, for his word cannot be heard unless your mind is quiet for a while and meaningless desires have been stilled. End quote. Number four, as Jesus writes, tell him to be sure not to mistake your role. If he overreacts to or over evaluates you as a person, both of you will be in danger. The Course contemplates this, saying Bill already feels that he lacks his own access to God. If he puts Helen on a pedestal as a spiritual idol, he will further denigrate himself and dangerously inflate her. This is basically saying, oh, each person has a different role, right? Great. We all have different roles all the time, right? And I love this part. I love this part especially because I don't think we need to inflate spiritual figures, right? Think of it more like someone is a lighthouse, right? Think of it more like someone is a lighthouse or someone is a signpost pointing to the truth, right? And this is how I often think of myself. I am not, right? I'm a representation, I am a symbol pointing to the truth, pointing to the love of God, and ultimately not separate from the love of God,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But for me to be on a pedestal, or for any other spiritual teacher to be on a pedestal, right? as opposed to be seen as a, I would say, tool of communication, right? They are an instrument of God, right? The music that God is playing through them is perfect for everyone involved, right? Um, but again, the lighthouse is pointing you to safety. The
Mhm.
lighthouse is saying safety is over here. Here, look, I'll light the path so you can see it, but you have to walk the path yourself. Number five, Jesus writes, he should try to get his own list. Armstrong may just mean his own one is strong. Huh, let's find out what that means. The cameo writes, the nature of Bill's list is not specified, but from what little we know, it seems very similar to Helen's list, which is discussed in the notes just days later. Her list is a list of people selected by guidance who have thrown away their chalice of atonement, their reconciliation with God, and who need Helen's help to get it back. She has been assigned, in other words, to hand them back their own chalice. Like Helen's list, Bill's list is also apparently a list of people, in that someone named Joe Armstrong is twice mentioned in connection with it. Fun. And like Helen's, it seems to be a list revealed by guidance, in that Helen appears to be asking Jesus, who is on Bill's list? However, rather than hearing the names of those on Bill's list, Helen gets a very different message. Jesus says he should try to get his own list. The name Armstrong is then apparently turned into a pun in which Bill's arm is strong enough for him to get his own guidance. That's funny. When it comes to guidance, in other words, Bill can rely on his own strength. He shouldn't be leaning so heavily on Helen. This somewhat curt guidance may sound quite definite, but it will soon be reversed. Jesus' discourse on Bill's hearing ends at this point, and things take a dramatic turn. It's as if during this guidance, something has been building in the background and it is now ready to break through. But before it can do so, Jesus needs to explain to Helen the bigger picture. He, this is Helen writing now, he, Jesus, thinks it's time for some explanations which we're probably ready for. There are always risks and speed ups. The whole thing was undertaken because things were getting behind schedule because so many people persistently lost more than they gained. Helen later, in her autobiography, fleshed out the thoughts that rapidly entered her mind at this point. She writes in her autobiography. I was given a sort of mental explanation, though in the form of a series of related thoughts that crossed my mind in rapid succession and made a reasonably coherent whole. According to this information, the world situation was worsening to an alarming rate. People all over the world were being called on to help and were making their individual contributions as part of an overall prearranged plan. I had apparently agreed to take down A Course in Miracles as it would be given me. The voice was fulfilling its part in the agreement as I would fulfill mine. I would be using abilities I had developed very long ago and which I was not really ready to use again. Because of the acute emergency, however, the usual slow evolutionary process was being bypassed in what might be described as a celestial speed up. I could sense the urgency that lay behind this explanation, whatever I might think about its content. The feeling was conveyed to me that time was running out. The cameo continues. Finally, it is clear that what has been happening, excuse me, Finally, it's clear what has been happening to Helen. Before her birth, she had agreed to enter this life in order to play her part in a global plan to restore humanity's forward progress, and this agreement, after slumbering for decades, had at last stirred to life. Receiving this information is a turning point, but instead of the process now rolling forward, things come to a grinding halt. Helen now writes this message from Jesus in large letters at the center of the page. Stop. Clearly, something has temporarily gone wrong. This leads Helen to offer to tear it all up. Helen, I'll tear it up if you want. Jesus, no, maybe tomorrow. Now, just write this. Remember your slip about the effects on Neurological Institute and his asking when you were going to call up. Without more context, this is a very opaque comment. It's obvious another reference to Bill's question, when are you going to call the hospital? But more than that, we cannot say. Now Helen writes an even more emphatic message from Jesus. Be careful. Double underlined. Ooh. We can tell this caution comes from Jesus since he repeats it in his next comments in a reference to Jonathan, Helen's husband Lewis, whom she often called Jonathan in the notes. Helen's weird with names. We'll find out. Helen's super weird about names. Also, tell Bill about Jonathan's remark, quote, I do not like you all sweetness and light. I like you a little sharp, if you get what I mean, end quote. And again, be very careful. Something is clearly wrong. Helen has been told with great emphasis to stop and be careful, and then to, again, be very careful. Helen even offers to tear it all up if you want. The overall implication seems to be that Helen is in danger of proceeding inappropriately, but in what way? To understand this, we have to look at the major temptation Helen has faced up to this point. In the summer, she had discovered that she had psychic abilities. About this, she reported, quote, I was actually becoming rather proud of the acquisition of such dramatic abilities, and I even caught brief glimpses of fantasies of power and prestige crossing in the back of my mind. This was this was the major obstacle she had faced in the run-up to the course, her ego being inflated by her newfound abilities. This obstacle was shifted by two pivotal experiences, both of which Helen marked as crucial turning points in accepting her function. In the first, she had a psychic vision of which a church she was sure she and Bill would see when visiting the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. This, however, turned out to be a useless application of her abilities, as Bill discovered that the church existed but had been razed long ago to make way for the clinic itself. The true use of her abilities came out on the way home when she was able to intuitively feel waves and waves of misery going through a young woman in the airport. This far more practical use of Helen's psychic abilities enabled her and Bill to render critical services to this woman at a turning point in her life. The Mayo Clinic experience was followed by and apparently led to an inner vision in which she discovered an ancient scroll on the floor of a cave. As she unrolled the scroll, she saw that the center panel said simply, God is. Opening the scroll further, she saw tiny letters begin to emerge on the right and left panels. She was told that on the left panel she could read all of the past, and on the right panel all of the future. Helen, however, chose to reject the reading of the past and the future and stick with just the center panel. This represented a key decision to use her abilities only for God, not for psychic feats. Helen seems to have believed that this was where she really accepted her function as scribe of the course. The road to accepting her function then had been one of repeatedly refusing to use her unusual abilities to fuel her ego and instead giving them to God to help others. Returning to our account of the late October dictation, it is probable then that as she stands on the brink of actually beginning her function, recording the course, she is facing some version of this same choice again. The particular way in which her ego wants to control her abilities becomes clear in what she writes the next morning, the morning of October 21st. She writes, AM. It crossed my mind last night that something very wrong had happened. I got mad because I thought I shouldn't be asked for you, Bill, and it was a form of exploitation that was very dangerous for me and represented an avoidance technique for you. I thought the whole thing was so dangerous that I had to tell you not to do it again. Briefly, it crossed my mind, but with no emotional impact at all, which is always suspicious, that I might just resent asking for someone else because I prefer the exclusive idea. This is so great. This is so great. Here it is. Helen now identifies what has gone so wrong last night. Her suspicion that it was dangerously unhealthy for Bill to ask her for guidance was actually the voice of her ego, wanting to keep this gift as her own private treasure, as a spring that only she could drink from. As the dictation proceeds, Jesus now elaborates on this. Christ says, I can tell something is wrong whenever I get a snappy answer. He wouldn't say, tell him to get his own list that way. The tone is wrong. So that fifth point that Bill should try to get his own list was in fact in error. It was a distortion introduced by the exclusive idea. Helen's urge to keep her gift to herself is warping her hearing, turning Jesus' voice into something snappy, and even, as he will later say, mean. This seems to solve the puzzle of why Jesus told her to stop and be careful. He can hardly proceed to dictate the course to her if her ego is taking control of her gift and distorting his voice. This morning it was very clear to me that in connection with you, Bill, I have not been right since I asked you what you wanted, so I could really be asking for you. This was essential, and except for the list where I slipped, the answer should be respected. Instead of asking on Bill's behalf, being very dangerous and an avoidance technique, it was in fact essential. And except for that point about Bill's list, what she heard was indeed accurate and should be respected. Helen writes, "You have every right. In fact, you should ask me to ask for you. This is not a selfish gift, and it is a real one." She says in parentheses, "This upsets me too. It has to be used for others, and particularly you." Jesus, ask Bill, please, to help you get over being mean about it fast. No, at the moment, I have serious doubts about everything. This is holding everything up, is what Helen writes. At the moment, I have serious doubts about everything. This is holding everything up. Here on the cusp of the course dictation actually beginning, Helen seems to have faced another version of the choice she made in the Mayo Clinic experience and in her scroll cave vision. In the face of the temptation to keep this gift exclusively for herself, she apparently decides with Jesus that this is not a selfish gift. She decides to use it for others, and particularly for Bill. She decides to fulfill her agreement to help the world situation. With this key decision made, it is as if the final barrier has been swept aside. Helen now writes this message from Jesus. You will see miracles through your hands, through me. This is the first line of what would become the miracle principles. The dictation of A Course in Miracles has begun. Yay! That's so fun. Okay. You will see miracles through your hands, through me. So the actual principles of miracle, the actual text of the course is all written by Jesus through Helen, right? The part that we just read, the cameo, is written by a Circle of Atonement, the Circle of Atonement, um, which is the group that edited Helen's notes for this version of the text, right? So they assessed her notes, they assessed her autobiography, all of the information that they could get a hold on to piece together the helpful stories of what was actually going on at the time. So now we're getting into Jesus's teaching. Chapter 1, Principles of Miracles. You will see miracles through your hands, through me. Number 1, the first principle of miracles is that there is no order of difficulty among them. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same. There is no order of difficulty in miracles. One miracle is just as easy as the next one. Miracle principle number 2, miracles in themselves do not matter. They are quite unimportant. Great. We'll later find miracles are a means to an end, right? Miracles are a tool, right? If you're building a house, um, the hammer matters at some points, right? It's a means to build the house. And yet, in the grand scheme of things, when you're actually looking at the house, the hammer does not seem very important at all, right? Quite unimportant. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. Oh, that's so sweet. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. Naturally, the miracles occur naturally is something that we'll see throughout the whole course. If miracles are not occurring, if expressions of love are not occurring, right? Because we already talked about um, how love cannot be blocked, right? It is only our awareness that can be blocked, right? So the block is occurring on our level of awareness of love's presence. So in this situation, miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. If miracles are not occurring naturally, right? If if we are unaware of the presence of love, um, that's where we are seeing things incorrectly. We are seeing in error, right? So miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. And again, throughout the course, we will be coming back to this idea of miracles occurring naturally. Miracles are our natural state of extension of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from that love is a miracle. This explains their lack of order, right? Lack of order being lack of difficulty, as mentioned in miracle principle number one. This explains their lack of order. All expressions of love are maximal. This also explains why miracles in themselves do not matter. The only thing that matters is the source, and this is far beyond human evaluation. This is under miracle principle 3, paragraph 3. Please read these three principles as often as you can today, if there as if there were going to be a quiz this evening. This is merely to introduce structure if it is needed. It is not to frighten you. Do not feel guilty if you are doubting these principles. Just reread them and their truth will come to you. My strength will support you, so don't worry and leave the rest to me. Thanks, Jesus. Let's reread those, right? The first principle of miracles is that there is no order of difficulty among them. One is not harder or bigger than another. They are all the same. Miracles in themselves do not matter. They are quite unimportant. And again, as we read in Principle 3, a reason why they're quite unimportant is because just like a spiritual teacher, they are a signpost, right? They are a means to an end. They are a signpost. They are a lighthouse. They are a symbol, an extension of the love that inspires them, right? Just how a lighthouse is going to show you to safety, right? Just how a sign is going to point you in the right direction. A miracle is an extension of the real love that inspires them. Okay, so that's number two. Miracles in themselves do not matter, they're quite unimportant. Miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. This explains their lack of order. All expressions of love are maximal, right? When we're looking at real love, when we're looking at true love, love that has no opposite, the all-encompassing love of God, there is no way to make it smaller. There is no smaller version of that love, right? You can't make it fit into a little button,
Mhm.
right? It's always it's always the love of God. It's always the love that it is, right? This also explains why miracles in themselves do not matter. The only thing that matters is the source, and this is far beyond human evaluation. So we see footnote 2. Based on the context, the source of miracles is love, since they are expressions of love. However, Helen originally spelled source with a capital S, and if that spelling reflects the intended meaning, the source would most likely be God. If so, source here refers to both God and love, or to God as love. That's so sweet. I love that. Please read these three principles as often as you can today, as if there were going to be a quiz this evening. This is merely to introduce structure if it is needed. It is not to frighten you. Do not feel guilty if you are doubting these principles. Just reread them and your truth will come to you. My strength will support you, so don't worry and leave the rest to me. This is the tone that Jesus carries throughout the entire course. It does not waver.
Mm.
right? This tone of a supportive teacher, right? Totally forgiving, never angry. If you're confused, don't worry. I'll carry you the rest of the way. Yeah.
I I've applied this to my life when I did not know what to do next, where to look the truth, where I felt lost. I always did this. I prayed, show me the truth, show me the answers, show me the way, and he always does.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Nice. That's perfect.
Mm.
I know I was gonna ask you, um, I feel like the cameo that we read was so juicy
Yeah, it was.
for where you're at and how much you're talking to God. I almost want to pull it up again.
Yeah.
Ah. Yeah, so many things. First of all, it's not a selfish gift,
No,
right? Not a selfish gift. How can I share this with others?
love is not selfish.
Love is not selfish.
If
The meditation technique, right? Here I am, Lord, right? I thought that was so good.
yeah.
I could see you doing that. I thought it was great too, how, yeah, huh. Oh, and God is focusing on the present, God is, as opposed to um the panel on the left side, using psychic gifts to understand the past, or the panel on the right side using psychic gifts to try and know the future, right? Is understanding like to truly give the gifts to God so he can use them. It's looking at the center panel, the present. God is, right? And you look at this in other spiritual teachings, right? It's not God was, it's not God will be, right? God is here and now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Good.
So I thought that was, I was reading that and I was like, ooh,
Oh yeah.
let's emphasize this
Yeah.
for Davide, apparently.
No, no, it speaks. It does. It speaks to me.
All right, we're still under miracle principle 3 on paragraph 4. All miracles mean life, and God is the giver of life. He will direct you very specifically. Plan ahead is good advice in this world where you should and must control and direct where you have accepted responsibility. But the universal plan is in more appropriate hands. You will know all that you need to know. Make no attempts to plan ahead in this respect. Plan ahead is good advice in this world where you should and must control and direct where you have accepted responsibility. But the universal plan is in more appropriate hands. You will know all that you need to know. Make no attempts to plan ahead in this respect. That's great. Great, give it up. The ultimate plan, right? I feel very happy I don't have to worry about that. That sounds like a very stressful thought,
Yeah,
you know.
but we are playing our parts
Yeah.
in the plan.
Yeah,
All of us,
inevitably.
every
Yeah,
single one of
every
us.
single one, yeah. Number 4, miracles are habits and should be involuntary. Otherwise, they may become undemocratic. Selective miracles are dangerous and may destroy the talent. Let's look at this. There's a footnote here, footnote number 4. Did I miss one? Oh yeah, I did miss one. Okay, we'll go right back to that one. Okay, footnote number 4. Undemocratic means that they would not be expressing social equality. They would not treat everyone equally, but would be given specially to some. In other words, they would be given out in a selective way, as the next sentence says. So what this is cautioning against is saying, "Oh, I like you, so here, let me share a miracle with you, or let me give you this expression of unconditional love, love of God, right? Let me extend this love to you, but not to them."
Mm.
Right? So this is what it's saying is recognizing miracles are habits and should be involuntary. When you feel called to share a miracle, which again, it is natural, right? Miracle principle three, miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. So if they're not happening, it's unnatural for us. If an expression of love is not happening, it is unnatural for us, right? They are part of our true state of being. So over here, miracles are habits and should be involuntary, falls into the same category of them naturally occurring, right? If they're not naturally occurring, or if they fall under voluntary control, where we're trying to control and choose who to extend love to and who to withhold love from, yeah, we're really at a loss,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, selective miracles are dangerous and may destroy the talent. The footnote that I missed was footnote number three. It was, let me see if I can find where it was. The only thing that matters is the source, and this is far beyond human evaluation. Footnote three, see Cameo 2, my strength will support you. Cameo, Cameo. The singing is extra. That's free. Cameo 2, my strength will support you. On the morning of October 21st, 1965, near the very beginning of the dictation of the miracle principles, right after Principle 3, which is what we just read, Helen had a revealing exchange with Jesus, one that tells us a great deal about him as a teacher. Jesus, you are breaking communication by thinking it's cute. This is not wrong, but it diverts your attention. Breaking is spelled Braking, as if you're breaking a car, as opposed to breaking a plate, right? And in not parentheses, but the blocky ones. Do you know what those are called? Anyway, it says breaking here is either a misspelling or a pun. Fun. Jesus is pretty punny. It's pretty good. Okay. Jesus is surprisingly agreeable about Helen's thought that it's cute. The problem with that thought is not that it is false, nor that it is bad. The problem is simply that it diverts her attention away from what he's saying. Helen has something to learn from him. It's vital, therefore, that she pays attention. Helen, that's true. Jesus, of course it's true. And I'm really glad you got the idea. I am not angry when this kind of thing happens, but the lesson deteriorates under lack of focus. Please read these 3 points as often as you can today because there may be a quiz this evening. This is merely to introduce structure. If it is needed, it is not to frighten you. The cameo continues. There is not a trace of sternness or judgment here. Jesus is not angry when Helen's attention is diverted, and he freely expresses his happiness when she gets what he's trying to say. He is entirely on her side. He just wants her to learn, period. It's not about appeasing him, it's about her own learning. For this reason, he urges her to read and reread the first 3 principles throughout the day because there might be a quiz that evening, although there is no evidence of such a quiz actually happening. He reassures her that this is not meant to frighten her into submission, it's just meant as a useful structure that will help her learn. Helen, well, would you regard this as a kind of miracle, maybe? Jesus, you better reread them now. There is nothing special or surprising about this at all. The one thing that happened was the universal miracle, which was the experiences of intense love you have felt. Don't get embarrassed by the idea of love, the text adds. Things that are true are not embarrassing. Embarrassment is only a form of fear, and actually a particularly dangerous form because it reflects egocentricity. Ooh, embarrassment. Nice. Now, don't think of how Bill will find this fascinating either. I told you to reread them, and you did not. This is all Jesus writing to her. Helen says, I am now. Helen's attention has been diverted again. Ignoring the instruction to reread the first three principles, she asks if communicating with him could be considered a miracle. This is an understandable reaction. She is, after all, having a conversation with a voice that claims to be Jesus. He finds a way to answer her question while at the same time drawing her back to his focus. He says, in effect, if you reread the first three principles, you'll see that the ability to communicate with me is not a miracle, that a miracle is an expression of love. Therefore, your experiences of intense love were experiences of the universal miracle. This probably refers to the preceding summer, in which Helen had a number of experiences of being in a crowd and feeling a brief but powerful affinity with everyone there. One such experience, she said that, quote, a sudden sense of deep emotional closeness to everyone there swept over me. At the mention of these experiences, Helen becomes embarrassed by the love she felt, a theme that will crop up repeatedly in the early dictation. This represents yet another diversion. Helen is pulling away from his teaching into self-concern. Rather than offering reassuring sympathy, therefore, Jesus quickly pops the bubble of her embarrassment. It is not humility, he says, but rather dangerous egocentricity. Then she pulls away again, musing to herself about whether Bill will find this fascinating. Jesus again brings her back to the task at hand. I told you to reread them, the principles, and you did not. And finally, she yields. I am now. This seems to set the stage for the touching communication that follows. Jesus, do not feel guilty about the fact that you are doubting this. Just reread them, and their truth will come to you. I love you, and I am not afraid or embarrassed or doubtful. My strength will support you, so don't worry and leave the rest to me. Jesus now addresses what probably lurks in the background behind all her diversions. Helen is feeling guilty about doubting his teaching. As a solution, he again brings her back to what he has already asked her to do 3 times already. Reread them. If she just does that, the truth of the principles will come to her and her doubts will be vanquished. Helen's guilt over her own doubt seems to be part of a larger feeling of inadequacy as a learner, for that is what Jesus speaks to next. Her fear, embarrassment, and doubt all erect barriers to her learning. As long as those feelings are there, how can she really learn what he's teaching? She can, implies Jesus, because he is there, and he not only loves her, as he openly tells her, but he is also free of all the barriers that hold her back. Jesus says, I am not afraid or embarrassed or doubtful. Therefore, she can just relax and lean on his strength. Jesus says, do not run to Bill to tell him. There will be time, but don't disrupt things. I'll arrange the schedule. You have a lot to do today. Get dressed or you will be late. But when you do see Bill, be sure to tell him how much he helped you through by giving you the right message. And don't bother with worrying about how you received it. That doesn't matter either. You were just afraid. Here's yet another diversion. Helen wants to run off and tell Bill what has happened, but rather than Jesus urging her yet again to reread the principles, time has moved on and the priority is now for her to get dressed and get to work. We might expect him to urge her to stay with this momentous happening, talking to Jesus, and get to work late. Instead, however, he shows that he is concerned with the rest of Helen's life. As important as their communication is, he doesn't want it to get in the way of her other responsibilities. He even offers to arrange her schedule for her. Then he shows his concern for Bill. Helen later wrote in her autobiography that when Jesus first began dictating the course to her, she called Bill in a panic, saying that the voice she had been hearing was now using very specific words and seems to want to go on for some time. That's quite funny. Bill made a simple and very practical suggestion. Try and write some more and see what happens. Jesus' comment above seems to be a reference to that phone call. If so, then Helen apparently didn't receive that suggestion very gracefully at the time, And Jesus wants Bill to know just how apt it was, and he wants Helen to not feel guilty for responding ungracefully. That doesn't matter either. You were just afraid. Here at the very beginning of the course, we have a revealing glimpse of how Jesus the teacher relates to his students. Helen, as we have seen, gets caught up in various diversions. This is cute. Is this a miracle? I feel embarrassed. I wonder what Bill will think. I've got to run and tell Bill. This is how my brain works sometimes. Many of these diversions, it seems, come down to one thing, an understandable fascination with the idea of Jesus Christ dictating A Course in Miracles to her. It's like a celebrity showing up at your class who has an important message to deliver, but all you can think about is the fact that a celebrity is standing right in front of you. In the midst of Helen's very human reactions, Jesus holds fast to his single agenda to get across his teaching. He is as focused as she is distracted. Therefore, no matter in what direction she pulls away, he keeps pulling her back to the principles he has just dictated to her, telling her again and again to reread them. He even asks her to do so throughout the day because there might be a quiz. He doesn't ignore her questions or her doubts. Rather, he tells her that she'll find the answers in the very principles he's asking her to study. Even though he stays firm with his agenda, he makes it abundantly clear that this has nothing to do with her doing what the authority says in order to be good or in order not to be bad. This is only about her learning. Thus, no matter what she says, he does not get angry with her. And rather than inducing fear or guilt in her to spur her into doing his bidding, he actively tries to relieve those feelings. When he needs to correct her, he follows this with reassurance. This is not wrong. I am not angry. And when she does receive his teaching, he is quick to tell her how glad he is. He wants nothing, not her distractions, not her embarrassment or doubt or guilt, and not any needs she imagined he has to get in the way of her learning. He is there purely for her. His whole demeanor reinforces this impression. He is present, engaged, and clearly concerned. He tells her how he feels about her reactions. I'm really glad you get the idea. And he tells her how he feels about her. I love you. And he explains himself. He does not leave her in a state of mystery, having to trust in his almightiness, but rather tells her plainly why he says what he does. Quote, the lesson deteriorates under a lack of focus, end quote. This is merely to introduce structure if it is needed, end quote. He even offers to make up for any lacks she may have as a learner. As he explains toward the end, he is free of all of these lacks. Thus, no matter how inadequate she may feel, she can rest on his love and strength, let go of her worry, and, quote, leave the rest to me, end quote. This snapshot of Jesus' will to teach meeting Helen, this snapshot of Jesus' will to teach, meeting Helen's desire to pull away, surely applies to more people than just her. What student of the course does not get drawn off in diversions and distractions? And when that happens to us, we can envision that the same teacher that was there with Helen is here with us, single-mindedly, yet patiently and lovingly, drawing us back to his teaching. Aw.
It speaks to, I'm sure, a lot of people, even to me.
Oh, yeah. I think that's great.
Hmm.
And I like where they place that story as well, right? And this is where the cameos can be really helpful, right? Because they're showing us how Jesus is actually communicating as a teacher, right? As a mentor, right? As opposed to here's the teaching and figure it out by yourself, right? Like as if it's a self-taught thing,
He's very
right?
loving.
He's very loving, very understanding, never judgmental, never angry, only focused on what is going to be best for your learning.
Yeah.
What is going to be best for your learning?
And what I love is like he does not expect anything for him. He's there for you,
Yes.
for everyone.
Yeah, he has no needs.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's
It's
true.
perfect. It's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mhm.
Cool. Nice. So we got through miracle principle 4. Miracles are habits and should be involuntary. Otherwise, they may become undemocratic. Selective miracles are dangerous and may destroy the talent. So we got through that one. Ooh, here we go. Number 5. This ties back to number 3. Miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. Very simply. We are extensions of God's love, right? Our natural state is to be extending this love that we are made of, right? And so when we are not extending love, right? And a miracle being an extension or an expression of love, when we are not extending that love, we are not as our true selves, right? Something has gone wrong. Miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. That's where we'll end today. Join us next week, 6:30 Eastern Time, or at the Main Street Museum, Studio 5 in White River Junction, Vermont, for A Course in Miracles study group.
Thank you.
Yay! And now I have to do